name is Jim Will. I'm president of the board of Tales of Cape Cod. Welcome to the Old Colonial Courthouse and the final program of our 2019 Summer Student. This year has been an outstanding year for Tales of Cape Cod. I want to thank our board for their hard work, and I want to thank you for your support throughout the season. Every year for the past 5 years, we have increased attendance at our summer speaker series by 25%. We've also doubled the membership in Tales of Cape Cod over the last 5 years. So we're very grateful for your support, and thank you for coming tonight. And we hope to see you again next season. The annual meeting of the members of Tales of Cape Cod is scheduled for December the 9th. At that meeting, the board will share with you our thoughts and plans for the 2020 season. We'll also ask for your recommendations and your insights concerning programming, special events, and especially the restoration of this building. The first phase of the restoration project was completed this year. We learned a tremendous amount about raising money. We learned a tremendous amount about managing a construction project as well. Thinking ahead, that was probably the simple part of the task. We knew we needed a new roof. We could look at the bell tower and say there were pieces missing that had been lost to time. We wanted to restore it. Now we're going to turn our attention to the interior of the building. And we will be sharing with you our thoughts, the recommendations that come from historical preservationists as well as the architects. And we dearly ask for your feedback on these. Tonight we have a very special program. Live performance of the world premiere of Cape Cod Radio Mystery Theater, Riddle of the Bones. Tales of Cape Cod is thrilled to bring you this program, and I wish to thank Annie and Steve Oney for making this possible. They have offered to have the premiere of the show here at Tales of Cape Cod, and 100% of the proceeds will go toward the restoration of the building. Cape Cod Radio Mystery Theater is well known throughout Cape Cod. It's well known across the United States, and is well known. It has a very strong international following as well. Steve's work has earned accolades from the International Radio Festival and grants. He has had grants from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and the National Endowment for the Arts. This very special event is funded in part by the Cape Cod 5 Foundation, by the Lamb and Lion Inn, with in-kind contributions from Minuteman Press, Charlie's Music, and is it the 6 Gs? 7 Gs. Thank you for your support throughout the year. Thank you for coming this evening. And now I will introduce Steve.
Stand here. I always like this lectern thing. It looks good. Thank you for coming out on this murky night. It truly is a foggy night on Old Cape Cod, and it truly is a perfect night for a mystery. I just want to compliment Gene Gill, who's the wonderful president for this organization. And I want to say Tales of Cape Cod is a wonderful organization. They do really good things. Chief among them, perhaps, is the maintenance and restoration of this incredibly important historical building. And we're very thrilled to be allowed to come here and perform in this space. Let me see. While I'm thanking people, I want to thank the culinary ladies there who have provided such a great feast, really. It's wonderful. I was standing there, and one of them came up to me, and she had a a black apron on, and she tugged me on the sleeve, and she said that it's almost Halloween, and because in honor of the trick-or-treat season, she told me that one of the desserts was going to be poison. Maybe she said one of them wasn't going to be poison. Well, let me tell you what we're doing tonight, how this is going to work. You see our on-air sign. It's going to say on air, but we're not going to be on air. But that doesn't mean it's just decoration, because we're taping the show tonight, and it'll be for later broadcast. So really, what you're being exposed to is a chance you get to listen to the show, but you can watch and see how it's done at the same time. This is the microphone, omnidirectional microphone that'll pick up in mono all of the voices. And there's another microphone over here in the cubby, and that will be picking up John McManus doing the manual sound effects, and my lovely wife helping with the pre-recorded things. And that also means that this room is a big sound stage. That reminds me to remind you to please turn off any of these electronic extensions of yourself. As we do this, we will be stopping just momentarily in between certain scenes to set up for each one. And then about halfway through the first act, there'll be an intermission, and then you're free to move about and exuberate or whatever you want to do. But while the on-air sign is on, kind of consider you're in the sound stage. I want to, if I may, just tell you a true story that sort of is apropos to what we're doing tonight. It's apocryphal, and I learned it from Dave Ellsworth, who was the original voice of Captain Underhill. And it seems that there was an actor in Connecticut, and he was an aspiring actor. He wanted to try his hand at it, and so he went around and he would do auditions, and he just couldn't seem to get a part. Finally, he did get one part, and it was for a live radio show at a radio station that was doing a drama about the Civil War. And he was given one line. He only got one line. And the line was, "Hark, I hear the cannons roar." So he went home and he practiced his line, and he was nervous like all of us have been. And he practiced, "Hark, I hear the cannons roar," or "Hark, I hear the cannons roar." "Hark, I hear the cannons roar." He just tried every different way he could do it. And so then the big day arrived, and it was evening, and the show was going to start, and he wanted to make sure he had plenty of time to get there. So he left really early, and then he got caught in a traffic jam. And the traffic jam kept him there for minutes and minutes and minutes. He looked at his watch, and he saw that the show had started. And he finally was able to get out and drive. He sped to the radio station. He pulled into the parking lot. It was full. He parked on the grass. He hopped out. He ran to the back of the building. He went in through the door, and there was the director, and there was where he was supposed to stand, and the director was pointing, and all of a sudden there was this big boom, and he said, "What the fuck was that?" We'll see any of that kind of thing. All right, so are we ready? Eileen, you want to come out? And put that on.
really?
Hush up. That's enough. Hush up. Can I help you?
Good morning. I'm sorry to disturb you on a Sunday. My name is Georgina Bellows. Are you Mr. Oney?
I didn't see your car pull in.
Oh, I left it out on the road and walked in.
Do you need roadside assistance?
No, nothing like that. I wonder if I might have a minute of your time? You are Mr. Oney.
What did you want to see him about?
I wanted to tell him how much I loved his Captain Underhill series.
He thanks you. We all thank you. I'll be sure and tell him.
I've listened to all of them, from The Legacy of Uriah Pillar to The Final Case of Captain Underhill. They're all terrific.
I'll convey that.
But are you sure you've collected them all?
What does that mean?
Are you sure that really was his final case?
Yes, quite sure. I can also tell you that the author is not accepting any new ideas for any more Captain Underhill stories.
Oh, this isn't a story. This is the truth. This really happened.
How do you know?
Because I was involved in it.
How were you involved?
Well, I've been a judge on the First District Court in Orleans. Years ago, I presided over an inquest into a murder case that took place in Wellfleet. Captain Underhill was involved. More than involved, actually. He solved the case.
Who died?
Well, that's one of the things the inquest was supposed to establish.
And was Dr. Schofield involved?
Oh, yes. The good doctor assisted in the hearing. In fact, he served as our quasi-medical examiner.
Excuse me, I'm going to stop you
What?
to tell you you're lying.
Why am I lying?
Because the real Dr. Schofield would have told me about it. He was very keen on making sure every one of his friend's cases became known and was recorded for posterity.
That's true. He was. And that's also the reason I've come to see you. If you will allow me, I'll tell you. It really did happen, I promise.
All right, I'll bite. Why don't you come up and have a seat on the porch?
Well, thank you.
Would you like a cup of coffee?
Oh, yes, that would be great.
Black?
Yes, black is fine.
All right, but be prepared. I may kick you off the porch if I determine you're lying.
That's fair enough. Good dogs. Good dogs. Yes, you really are a good dog. Yeah. You like me, huh? Yeah, I know. Well, you gotta be nice to each other. Here you go.
Here you are. Here's your coffee.
Thank you. Oh, delicious. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, what is this story you have to tell me?
Several years after Barry Clifford discovered the sunken pirate ship, Riddle, the chief medical examiner in Boston contacted me and asked me to preside over an inquest into the death of an unknown person. Of course, I had heard of Captain Underhill before. Most people have. But I'd never actually seen him nor made his acquaintance until that first day of the inquest, when he suddenly spoke up from the gallery of the courtroom. It happened not long after Bertie had begun his questioning of the first two witnesses, salvage scuba diver Dirk Scooby and marine archaeologist Nicky Woodward.
Okay, folks, come on. Let's see. So, right. Ready with that? Everybody set? And go ahead.
Yes, next slide.
As you can see, it appears to be a wooden crate.
And what is in this crate?
A human body wrapped in a shroud, head to foot.
Although hardly a body anymore. All that's left there is a skeleton.
Human tissue?
No human tissue.
True, but it's just about the most perfect Halloween skeleton you've ever seen.
Now, as to this skeleton,
Perhaps, Bertie, it would be best if we allowed the doctor's testimony in here, since he will be talking about the corpse and its condition.
all right, yes, good idea.
The state calls Dr. Alexander Schofield.
No need for formal swearing in, Miss Hattie. Dr. Schofield, you're under oath.
I understand, Judge.
Dr. Schofield, you examined this body?
Well, not examined exactly. It's still in its crate, still wrapped in its shroud, but I've been able to examine it from the photos and x-rays taken.
Excuse me, the The gentleman at the back is raising his hand.
Since human remains were found and since the body is wrapped in its shroud, wouldn't it be more accurate to refer to the container as a coffin or a casket, not a crate?
I suppose you're right, although it looked pretty rough-hewn to me, but then I don't know what kind of carpenters pirates were.
I propose that we stick with calling it a crate, since that is the word the witness himself came up with.
Just trying to be helpful, Judge.
I don't imagine pirates made coffins too often.
Dr. Schofield, go on. Please tell us what your examination of the body revealed.
That the crate, or coffin, contained the skeletal remains of a man approximately 6 feet tall, probably in his late 20s to early 30s. Now, Mr. Scoopy here is correct, describing it as the perfect Halloween skeleton. For example, all of the ligaments connecting the phalanges, fingers and toes, are all still attached. It's not a bundle of bones by any means.
I don't understand. Doesn't that apply to other drowning victims you've come upon?
No, it doesn't. They tend to be just piles of bones or individual bones. The better condition of this skeleton is, without a doubt, due to the fact it was in a crate wrapped in a shroud.
Were you able to detect any damage to the skeleton?
Yes, I did, in 3 places.
And what were they?
Well, it would be best if we would turn to the next slide. The most apparent damage is a circular wound about 2 inches in diameter, approximately the size of a silver dollar, that is directly visible on the left anterior lobe of the skull, halfway between the eyebrow ridge and the crown.
And in your opinion, Doctor, would this wound have been fatal?
Oh, yes. Most definitely it would have been.
And Doctor, by your examination, were there any other wounds that you were able to detect?
Yes, I found that the outer 2 fingers of this left hand had been shattered, as you see in this close-up. Now, I'm not a trained forensic scientist, but I have watched enough TV shows to know these would be considered defensive wounds, occurring when the victim attempted to shield himself from a blow by a blunt instrument and raised his hand to ward off the attack.
I don't believe it's been established it was a blunt instrument.
Well, Waverly, it certainly wasn't a slash from a pirate's cutlass. It's obvious it had to be a blunt instrument. Judge, Your Honor, sorry for my friend's continual interruptions. He should know better. But may I suggest that if he is going to be interrupting in this way, that he be invited to sit closer. I know he doesn't have any direct testimony to offer, but as a former police captain, this is sort of his bailiwick.
Police captain? Wait a minute. Did you say Waverly? This isn't Captain Underhill, is it?
I'm afraid so.
The Captain Underhill?
Yes, the Captain Underhill.
Oh, Captain Underhill. I'm familiar with many of your cases. Yes, by all means, come up and join us.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Bertie, continue with your question.
Let me ask Mr. Scooby and Dr. Woodward, did both of you notice these same wounds?
No, not at first. None of the broken fingers. Not until Dr. Schofield pointed them out.
And what did it cause you to do?
Well, it didn't cause me to do anything.
It caused me to do something. It caused me to contact the coroner's office.
And why did you do that? Weren't there other human remains that you've been bringing up previously?
There were.
And did you contact the coroner's office when you found those?
No, we did not.
Why not?
Because all of the other human remains we have recovered so far clearly met their fate by drowning, or else when the ship turned turtle and heavy items of cargo fell out and landed on them. These bones were the only bones we've recovered that seem to indicate a natural death, skullduggery.
I see. And that is why you chose to report it?
I didn't choose to report it. That's what the law says.
Most commendable. And you were right to do so, despite the corpse's obvious antiquity.
The law says any reportable death.
I'm wondering, Judge, does it have to be unnatural? How do we know the injury didn't occur when the ship flipped over and spilled its heavy cargo? It could have been a cannonball drifting down.
Alex, please, if it had been a cannonball...
Waverly, you should raise your hand or wait until you're called on to speak.
Well, look at the evidence. A cannonball would have...
That's all right. Go ahead, Captain.
Generally speaking, it is difficult to crush a human skull in a casket without also causing damage to the casket and the shroud it is wrapped in. There appears to be no damage to either.
Oh, that's right. So that would be...
And now, Dr. Woodward and Mr. Scooby, is there anything further that you would wish to bring to this court's attention? Anything that might influence the court's findings?
Yes, Your Honor. A couple of things. Inside the crate, we also found 4 grapefruit-sized beach stones. They looked like they were put there to weigh it down.
To make it sink?
Presumably.
I see. And what else did you find?
As Dr. Schofield and Captain Underhill pointed out, the body is still wrapped, head to toe, in its shroud. However, inside the shroud, in addition to the skeleton, we also found several handfuls of coins. With close examination by X-ray, we were able to determine that these coins are consistent with the time period. That is to say, coins minted from approximately 1600 up until the date of the sinking in 1717.
Similar to other coins brought up from the wreck.
Yes, Your Honor, very similar.
All right. Are there any other clues anyone wishes to point out as to whom this murdered man may have been?
Nothing more, Your Honor.
I'm afraid not, Your Honor.
And this seems to point to our chief dilemma, doesn't it? We seem to have come to a dead end.
This is about as cold a case as cold cases ever get.
Uh-huh. Cold and wet.
Very well. All right, then. Without any further testimony to insert into the transcript, I will proceed now to my findings.
Your Honor.
Captain Underhill, you're raising your hand.
Your Honor, I wonder if we are perhaps being too hasty in wrapping all this up so quickly.
This happened 300 years ago, Waverly. It's ancient history. What would be the point in keeping this open any longer?
What's the point in not keeping it open? What's the rush? He's not going anywhere. I'd merely like a chance to look into it, Your Honor.
Now, Waverly, you don't want to waste the court's time.
We won't know if I am wasting the court's time until I look, will we?
It would seem to me that if we can't, at the minimum, establish who the murder victim was, then how can we possibly hope to find out who the murderer is?
I understand, Your Honor. Even so, I'd like a chance to look into it.
All right. I'm willing to go along and postpone my findings. After all, there's no real urgency in this matter. It's not as though there's some killer on the loose that we need to be worried about.
Unless it's a ghost.
Yes, honey. Unless it's a ghost.
Your Honor, if this was murder, we are well beyond any statute of limitations.
There are no statute of limitations for murder, Alex.
The captain's right. All right, Mr. Underhill. How about if I grant you a 2-week stay to poke around, as you say? Will that be sufficient?
That would be fine, Judge. Thank you.
I'm therefore directing a continuance of this hearing. We will meet again in 2 weeks' time. This coroner's court now stands adjourned.
Okay, a little break here. Let's see. We need, you two can go, and then Eileen over here, I think. And yeah, that'd be good for you two. That's good. And the intercom. Okay, everybody ready?
Yes? Yes?
Dr. Schofield and Captain Underhill are here to see you.
Oh, really? Well, good then. Send them in. Send them in. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Judge. Good of you to see us without an appointment. I hope we're not intruding.
No problem at all. Captain Underhill, good to see you again, too.
Same to you, Your Honor. Good to see you too, Judge.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
So, Captain, how's your research coming along? Have you made any progress?
Some. This case has taken an unexpected turn.
Oh, really? An unexpected turn.
That's why Alex and I thought we should come and see you.
Do you know about this, Alex?
No, not the particulars. As usual, my friend here likes to keep everything he knows close to the vest.
So, Captain, you care to elaborate what this new information is?
I did some research on it.
Did you try carbon dating the skeleton?
No, I'm afraid that wouldn't work.
Why?
Carbon dating only works on things between 500 to 50,000 years old.
So what were you able to do?
I was able to extract a small sample of the shroud, and I sent it to an expert in materials who works for the Smithsonian. She identified the type of cloth it was, and from that we were able to determine that it did come from a shipwreck.
Oh, well, that's not surprising, is it?
Actually, it is, Your Honor. It came from a shipwreck, but not that shipwreck.
What?
Not from the widow.
I don't understand.
I don't understand either, Waverly.
The material the shroud is made from is an expensive form of tow cloth that was not actually manufactured at all until the year 1842.
Say that again? You said 1842?
The material in the crate that skeleton is wrapped in was not commercially available until the year 1842.
Holy moly, Captain. Are you sure about this?
I'm sure.
1842? That's incredible. But how were you able to determine it came from another shipwreck?
From this.
What's this?
It's a book, Your Honor. It's by Henry David Thoreau. I got it out of the library.
I saw you reading that, Waverly.
Oh, I thought he wrote Walden Pond.
He did. He also wrote one called Cape Cod. Thoreau made several visits to the Cape. The first was in 1849, and in it he wrote about the wreck of the Franklin, which had gone aground off Newcomb Hollow in Wellfleet about 6 months before he got there. Here, let me read to you what it says on page 122 of the Penguin edition. This is quoting Thoreau now. As we were walking close to the water's edge this morning, we turned round by chance and saw a large black object which the waves had just cast up on the beach behind us. 2 men came running from the bank, where no human beings had appeared before, as if they had come out of the sand in order to save it before another wave took it. As we approached, it took successively the form of a huge fish, a drowned man, a sail or a net, and finally of a mass of tow cloth, part of the cargo of the Franklin, which the men loaded into a cart. And then on page 124 he continues, we afterwards saw many small pieces of tow cloth washed up, and I learned that it was continued to be found in good condition even as late as November in that year, 6 bolts at a time. Finally, on page 133, it says, it, the ocean, is still heaving up the tow cloth of the Franklin, and perhaps a piece of some old pirate's ship, wrecked more than 100 years ago, comes ashore today.
But Waverly, I don't understand. How could a body that died in 1717 possibly be wrapped in a cloth that didn't exist until 1842?
That's what I've been wondering too, Alex. Furthermore, there is this to ponder. How could there be a handful of coins found inside the shroud that all date from 1717 or earlier?
But that's impossible.
Yes, but those are the facts.
Captain, are you sure about this?
I'm sure.
Well, that certainly shines a whole new light on the inquest.
But we still don't know who the body is.
No, we do not.
And even with this revelation, we still probably never will.
Not necessarily.
What did you have in mind? After all, everyone from that time period is long since dead.
That's true. But we do have eyewitness testimony.
Wait, what eyewitness?
Henry David Thoreau himself.
Was he an eyewitness?
Not to the murder, I doubt that. But he was there on the Cape around this time, and he was aware of things going on around him. And he met several of the locals and wrote about them in this book.
So who were these people he wrote about?
He didn't give their names, but he wrote about them. And every one of them would have to be considered a potential suspect, if by virtue of nothing else than the fact that they were alive and living back at that time.
What do you want me to do now, Captain?
I'd like another 2 weeks, Judge. Give me some more time to study Thoreau's journal and to search the other local records of the time and see what more I can come up with. There should be a lot more information available stemming from the middle 1800s than there were 100 years before, when pirates were roaming the landscape.
Absolutely. Request granted. Captain, take as much time as you need.
That would be fine, Judge. Thank you.
This is really turning into quite a remarkable inquest.
And now we need just the two of you. And we're all set.
Just a little more volume in the dialogue.
You're all right, there's a little more.
All right.
Where are we?
Almost there, almost there. Here's your backpack. Take this too, and I'll carry the rest.
How come I have to carry the most?
Because I have to lead the way, and I need my hands free for the flashlight.
Well, you could let me lead the way.
You don't know where we're going.
Uh-huh. And whose fault is that?
Come on, Doctor. Follow me. We're coming to the edge of the cliff now. Watch your step so you don't plummet over. That's the Atlantic out there.
Awfully calm, awfully dark.
Good for our purposes.
And just what are our purposes?
You'll see.
Oh, yeah? How do we get down?
There's a draw just to our left called Breaker Hollow. We'll go down that way.
It's a clear night, I'll say that. Look at all the stars. They're visible all the way down to the horizon, as if they're dropping in.
Must make a big hiss when they do.
I'll give you a big hiss. Waverly, won't you at least give me a hint of what we're doing?
No, but I'll tell you the folklore of this place.
Folklore? What folklore? I didn't know this place had a folklore.
Are you kidding? The spot on the beach where we're going to be camping is directly opposite the very spot where the widow went down.
Really? The very spot, huh?
Think of the treasure that may still be out there.
Think we'll find any?
Well, not likely, but think of the ghost stories we can tell. 136 pirates perished that night. Think of the restless spirits that must haunt this place. And think how galling it must have been to have that upstart Barry Clifford come along and help himself to their loot, which they can now never touch. In fact, on certain nights, on certain times of the high tide, there are said to be spooky sounds that echo up the draw. Come on, let's head down.
Spooky sounds, huh? Wait! What spooky sounds?
Here we are. If you will be good enough to set up the tent over there, I'll gather driftwood for a bonfire right here.
A bonfire? What for? Are you going to try to lure ships to their doom like the Mooncussers used to do?
Not exactly.
Not exactly. You mean we might?
No, I doubt it.
Well, I hope not. I haven't heard any spooky sounds yet.
Me neither.
Now what are you doing?
Adding more logs to the fire. I want it to be burning bright.
What's the frying pan for?
For breakfast in the morning, I brought kippers and eggs, breakfast of champions.
Oh, good, good. Well, there's no wind. Fire will watch itself. Getting close to high tide. Maybe we should go back up to the draw and listen, Maybe we can hear those spooky sounds they talk about.
No, I'm going to stay by the fire, but go ahead if you want to.
No thanks. Not after that business of pirate ghosts guarding their treasure. Sounds very Nancy Drew to me.
Well, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, Alex. After all, where do you think fiction gets its material?
I have no idea. Were you ever a Boy Scout, Waverly?
Yes, but only for about a week. I was more the loner type.
Oh, you were, huh? A loner. Yeah. I guess you still are. Waverly, what do you suppose it was like when those ships were lured to their doom by bonfires on the beach? Now, I bet that was spooky.
You know what would be spooky, Alex, is if you ever stopped talking.
Ah, well, sorry. I guess I just feel more comfortable talking. That's all. Waverly, we've been sitting here for another hour. Nothing's happened. How long are we going to keep this up?
All night, if necessary. If you're tired, go sleep in the tent, Alex. That's what it's there for.
No, I want to do my part and keep you company.
I don't need your company.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's no wonder you're a loner.
It's no reflection on you, Alex. You know that. I'm just saying that it's no problem if you do retire, but, if you do go to the tent, you have to stay there. By no means do I want you coming up around the fire again. It's very important.
You know, you're being unnecessarily mysterious again.
Am I?
Am I? Yes, you are.
Say goodnight, Alex.
All right, you win.
Get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning.
All right, see you in the morning.
And remember what I said. Don't come back out here.
Stay put, he says. Stay put. Okay. What's he up to? Here's the tent. Better empty my shoes. How do you brush your feet off and step into the tent without bringing the sand in with you? Oh, okay, there we are. Okay, now I've got to get into this sleeping bag. All right. This thing's almost claustrophobic. Hey, maybe I'll just take my bag outside and sleep under the stars. No, Waverly said don't come out again. Oh, this is not very comfortable. How am I supposed to sleep with all this racket? Those waves are sounding more magnified inside this tent than they were a minute ago. A lot closer, too. Must be high tide. I just hope no big wave is gonna come in and swallow me. If it does, this sleeping bag will probably end up being my shroud. Boy, those sounds really are magnified. I'll have to tell Waverly about this in the morning. I better take one more small peek at him just to be sure he's all right. Oh my God, what's happening? What's he doing? Wait, something's attacking him. I don't see it, but he's desperately trying to fend it off. I've got to go help him. Wait, he said not to, but I've got to go. He's fighting for his life out there.
All right, good, thanks. Intermission.
Room will come to order. Inquest into the death of person unknown. Justice Georgina Bellows, Deputy Coroner presiding.
Coroner's Court is now in session. There have been some new developments in this case since our initial hearing. Captain Underhill here has been able to bring to light some startling new facts. Chiefly, that the shroud the corpse is wrapped in is made of material that hails from the middle 1800s, not the 1700s as was supposed. Therefore, instead of a 300-year-old murder case, it appears we are presented with nearly a 150-year-old murder case. I have reconvened this hearing today to learn from Captain Underhill if he has been able to bring to light any additional facts. Therefore, Bertie, if you'd like to call Captain Underhill to take the stand.
Yes, Your Honor, the state called.
Actually, Judge, begging the court's indulgence, I have brought with me someone I feel can shed some light on this case. I would ask permission to call him to the stand and question him myself.
Well, this is highly unusual. Bertie, do you have any objections?
I agree, this is highly unusual, Judge, but no objections, Your Honor.
All right, Captain. Step forward, I'll allow it. Step forward and call your witness.
I call Henry David Thoreau to the stand.
What?
Can't do that.
Bear with me, Your Honor.
I don't believe it, what?
Bear with me, everyone, bear with me.
All right, very well. Hattie, swear in the witness.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that any testimony you shall give before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
State your name.
Jules Atherton Cuffey.
Be seated.
Mr. Cuffey, are you Henry David Thoreau?
No, I am not.
Would you say that you have a special connection, a special relationship to him?
I would.
And what is that relationship?
I have played the celebrated author in a one-man show for the past 21 years.
And would you consider yourself an expert witness in all things Henry David Thoreau?
I think I can claim to be the world's foremost authority. I know Thoreau's personal history frontwards and backwards. I have studied him extensively.
Which of his works have you studied?
All of them. I've read his books, his journals, his poems, his essays, on Walden Pond, on the abolitionist John Brown, on civil disobedience, on transcendental meditation. I won't claim that I can channel the man, but I would say that I know as much about him as any other person now living.
Impressive.
Furthermore, I happen to look like him to a significant degree. I am wearing now the clothing he would have worn. My short beard, which outlines my jawline, is the type of beard he wore. I'm also familiar with hundreds of his quotations, for which he is well known.
Can you name some, such as...
Such as, if a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer.
Any more?
Well, hundreds more. All right, here's another one. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. Oh, here's a good one. It is not enough to be busy, so are ants. The question is, what are we busy about? And here's another one of my favorites. An early morning walk is a blessing for the whole day. Shall I go on?
No, that's plenty. And so, tell us, Mr. Cuffey, what is your assessment of Henry David Thoreau?
My assessment is that he was a great man, noble in his thinking, principled in his living, a man of strong convictions, a man who enjoyed his solitude, who didn't suffer fools lightly.
Now then, Mr. Cuffey, before we begin, I want to make something clear. You and I have spoken before, have we not?
Well, yes, when you called me up and asked me to participate in this mock trial.
This is not a mock trial, Mr. Cuffey. This is a true inquest.
And so, Mr. Cuffey, when we spoke, have I told you what questions I intend to ask, or what answers I would like you to give?
No, not at all. Quite the opposite. You merely said I should answer them as best I could in the way I believed Thoreau himself would have answered them.
Exactly so.
Captain Underhill, this is most unusual.
I understand, Your Honor, but I will be adhering strictly to the historical record. I won't be making things up.
Very well. Proceed.
Mr. Cuffey, would you now please assume the role of Henry David Thoreau? Am I now speaking with Henry Thoreau?
You are.
And I show you this book, Mr. Thoreau, titled Cape Cod. Are you familiar with it?
I ought to be. I wrote it.
And are you well acquainted with Cape Cod?
Reasonably well. No, I would say very well.
Because you made several trips here, is that why?
Also because I am known to be an excellent observer.
That suits our purposes very well.
It's not what you look at that matters. It's what you see.
Another one of your quotes?
It is.
Lovely. You visited the Cape how many times?
3 times.
I believe some historians claim it was 4.
I can't control what historians say.
When was the first time?
The first time was October of 1849. The second was June 1850. The third was July 1855.
And each time you visited, you walked the outer arm of the Cape, roughly from Eastham to Provincetown, is that correct?
That is correct. Twice on the Atlantic side, once on the Bay side.
What was your impression of Cape Cod?
I had many impressions.
In general, I mean. What were they in general?
My impression was it was an excellent place for solitude. A man may stand there and put all of America behind him.
The stretch of Cape that you walked is now under the protection of the Cape Cod National Seashore.
So I understand. I heartily approve. In wildness is the preservation of the world, as the great poet remarked.
Who is the great poet?
Me.
Of course. Now, Mr. Thoreau, I would like to focus on what you wrote in this book, Cape Cod, which is chiefly about your first visit to the Cape, and I want to concentrate on the people you met along the way.
All right.
You didn't give their actual names.
No, I did not.
Why not?
There was no need to. They served my purpose just as well being unidentified. I was only using them for local color.
It would have been helpful if you had, but that's all right. Okay, let's begin with that first trip and trace your route. You traveled by stagecoach as far as Orleans.
Yes.
Then you hiked the outer arm of the Cape, roughly from Eastham to Wellfleet, to Truro and on to Race Point and eventually to Provincetown, is that right?
It is.
The first person you met was an old woman whom you identified as the Old Nauset Woman. Let's consider her. Please read to us what you had to say about her on page 54 of this Penguin edition.
One singularly masculine woman, of a hardness and coarseness such as no man ever possesses or suggests. It was enough to see the vertebrae and sinews of her neck and her set jaws of iron, which would have bitten a board nail in two in their ordinary actions, braced against the world, talking like a man-of-war's man in petticoats, or as if shouting to you through a breaker. Not from around here, are ya? We don't get too many of your kind. Strange as we get, mostly Bible thumpers at the East End camp meetings, where on a Sunday during service, women go into hysterics. Where one woman is affected, 5 or 6 others tend to sympathize, and pretty soon the whole congregation is thrown into utmost confusion. Was me, I'd treat those biddies to some ridicule and threats.
You're certainly right. She was colorful. Yes. Would you call her dangerous at all?
How do you mean?
Do you think she might have been a dangerous person?
No, not at all. Maybe to the Bible thumpers she would be.
Thank you. And now, in the next chapter, titled The Beach, you met up with the next person you came across, whom you identified only as the Wrecker, one of the itinerant people who roam and comb the outer beaches looking for, let's see, what did you say? Looking for driftwood and fragments of wrecked vessels. You identified him as a regular Cape Cod man, with a bleached and weather-beaten face, who carried a hooked pike staff with which to snag items out of the surf.
That's right. He had a grapple and a rope. We asked him what he was doing. I'm a-looking for tow cloth, which had made part of the cargo of the ship Franklin, which was wrecked here in the spring. The wrecker said that tow cloth was still cast up in such storms as this.
Thank you. Now tell me, did he strike you as an unsavory character?
Unsavory? I generally reserve that word for dishes. Colorful, certainly.
And him, do you think he might have been capable of murder?
The savage in man is never quite eradicated.
Another great poet remark?
It is.
What did you think he intended to do with the tow cloth he was collecting?
Salvage it and sell it, says he. It is still quite good,
And what was your impression of him? The other kind of impression, we've heard your regular impression. Was he friendly?
Yes, I would say so. He explained to me about the large clam I had caught. That there is a sea clam or hen. Roast it over a fire. It is quite good to eat.
But he didn't strike you as dangerous. He is a wrecker. He was a wrecker. He did wreck things.
Not unless you tried to make off with any of his salvage goods. As the wrecker explained, whoever finds driftwood or the spoils of a shipwreck on the strand enjoys it as his own, though he does not live there. It's his so long as he hauls it ashore and lays a stone upon it, as a token that he has taken possession of it.
Thank you. Now, Henry, let's move on. You continued up the beach, approximately to the boundary between Wellfleet and Truro, and there you encountered another native Cape Codder in his home, along with his whole family and this person you identified as the Wellfleet Oysterman.
That is so.
This was a particularly funny part of the book.
Thank you.
In fact, 2 years after this trip, in 1851, you began giving lectures on the Lyceum circuit about your sojourn to the Cape, and it was said your audiences were convulsed by your stories about the Wellfleet Oysterman.
That is true.
Tell us about him.
He too was a very colorful individual.
Why don't you read us some of what you wrote?
I don't need that. I know what I said. This was the merriest old man that we had ever seen, and one of the best preserved. His style of conversation was coarse and plain enough to have suited Rabelais. I am a poor good-for-nothing critter. Isaiah says, I am all broken down this year. I am under petticoat government here.
And what about the Wellfleet Oysterman's family? Read that.
The family consisted of the old man, his wife and daughter, who appeared nearly as old as her mother, a fool, her son, a brutish-looking middle-aged man with a prominent lower face who was standing by the hearth when we entered but immediately went out, and a little boy of 10.
And what about that fool? Read us what you wrote on page 104, if you would.
At length the fool, whom my companion called the wizard, came in, muttering between his teeth, Damn book peddlers, all the time talking about books. Better do something. Damn 'em all, get a gun and shoot 'em. Whereat the old man stood up and said in a loud voice, John, go sit down, mind your business. Your bark is worse than your bite. But without minding him, the fool muttered the same gibberish over again and then sat down at the table which the old folks had left.
Now, about this fool again, he spoke about threatening to shoot people. Surely you would consider him capable of murder.
I wouldn't say so. He struck me as harmless. I'll talk.
What about the women in this family? May I ask you to read what the Wellfleet Oysterman had to say about his wife and daughter?
These women, he said to me, are both of them poor good-for-nothing critters. This one is my wife. I married her 64 years ago. She is 84 years old and as deaf as an adder. And the other one's not much better.
Unsettling?
Not really. Struck me as harmless. I'll talk.
And yet you wrote they acted suspiciously.
Of us, they were.
You wrote, and I quote, As we approached the house before we reached it, an old woman came out and fastened the door of her bulkhead and went in again. I'd call that slightly unsettling, wouldn't you?
Not really, as I say in the book.
You wrote about their suspicions again on page 112. Yet, after all, one of the old ladies who came into our room in the night to fasten the fireboard, which rattled as she went out, took the precaution of fasten us in.
Though that was natural, we being perfect strangers showing up from out of nowhere.
Look at that. She fastened you in. I suppose she must have thought you were the unsavory ones.
Not really. As I say in the book, old women are by nature more suspicious than old men. Before sunrise the next morning, they let us out again.
You slept the night among these critters, as the old man called them, and you felt perfectly safe. But apparently the old women did not. Seems odd. But I guess all that is all explained by what you wrote on page 116. Would you read that passage, please?
It was but a day or two after this that the safe of the Provincetown Bank was broken open and robbed by two men from the interior, and we learned that our hospitable entertainers did at least transiently harbor the suspicion that we were the men.
Now, Henry David Thoreau, I presume you and your companion didn't rob that bank, did you?
Most assuredly we did not.
I agree. I don't think you did. In fact, on page 206, you addressed the matter of the bank robbery again. Would you read that for us?
We have heard that a few days after this, when the Provincetown Bank was robbed, speedy emissaries from Provincetown made particular inquiries. Indeed, they traced us all the way down the Cape and concluded that we came by this unusual route, down the backside and on foot, in order that we might discover a way to get off with our booty when we had committed the robbery. The real robbers were two young men from Worcester County who traveled with a center bit and are said to have done their work very neatly. But the only bank that we pried into was the great Cape Cod Sand Bank, and we robbed it only of an old French crown piece, some shells and pebbles, and the materials of this story.
By the way, this we you keep referring to, who was he?
He was my traveling companion I had along with me on this trip.
What was his name?
I didn't give him a name.
Why not? Somebody gave him a name. Why not use it?
As I said, I chose not to identify people if not identifying them suited my purpose just as well.
Some historians mentioned a William DaCosta. Was it him?
I can't say.
Some say it was your poet friend, Ellery Channing. Him?
I can't say.
Well, still other historians say that Ellery Channing preceded you to the Cape. That sort of implies that he wasn't along for the trip, but somehow came before you. Do you want to clear that up?
There is nothing to clear up. This book was meant to be a travelogue. If I left out actual names, it was because there was no need to include them.
So, after your night at the Wellfleet Oysterman's home, you then retraced your path back down the beach before actually turning around again, and continuing on to Race Point in Provincetown. It's a little vague there. Is that what you did?
I am a little vague there, too. I took several trips to the Cape. It is easy to get them mixed up in my mind.
Shall I refresh your memory?
If you can.
All right. Let's return to that old crown piece you said you found. On page 186, you mentioned the sinking of the Widow, and you quote what a Wellfleet historian said about it. Would you just read for us this passage that I have underlined?
At times to this day, there are King William and Queen Mary's coppers picked up and pieces of silver called cob money. The violence of the seas moves the sands on the outer bar so that at times the iron caboose of the ship, that is Bellamy's, at low ebbs can be seen.
By Bellamy's, you're referring to the pirate captain Sam Bellamy.
Yes.
And by ship, you're referring to the Widow.
Correct.
And by caboose, that means the instructed galley area of the ship, primarily the cook stove.
That's right.
Must have been exciting when you happened upon that coin in the surf.
It was. However, it was not a coin from the Widow, as the date on it proved.
So let's see. You say you were walking on the beach, looking for shells and pebbles, not knowing if you might find some cob money. And now read for us this underlined passage on page 187, if you will.
I did actually pick up a French crown piece worth about $1.06 near high water mark. It was of a dark slate color and looked like a flat pebble, but still bore a very distinct and handsome head of Louis XV.
That must have been a very exciting find.
It was exciting. Of course, I repeat, it wasn't from the Widow, since the date on it was 1741.
Still, no doubt it must have made you and your friend look further, hoping to find more.
I don't recall.
I believe I can refresh your memory. Shall I refresh your memory?
If you can.
A little further on the same page here, I'll read what it says. Afterward, rambling on the bars at low tide, I cheated my companion by holding up round shells between my fingers, whereupon he quickly stripped and came off to me. You were pretending to him that you had found more coins. That is the way I read it.
I had forgotten that.
Had you?
Had I what?
Found more coins?
No. As I have already said, the French crown piece was the only coin I found.
Do you think you might have found more, but neglected to write about it?
I see no reason to believe that.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you did find more. In fact, let's imagine you came upon a whole cache of Widow coins, spilled out in the sand in the shallows. Let's just suppose for a minute that you did.
Why should we do that?
Judge, Your Honor, I am going to request that I be given even more latitude. I wish to handle this witness now as a hostile witness.
A hostile witness? What does this mean?
That means he wishes to ask you questions that you may answer only by yes or no. But I don't understand, Captain. Do you intend to badger your own witness?
Nothing of the kind, Your Honor. This is all a part of our search for the truth.
Mr. Cuffey, that is Mr. Thoreau, do you object to this?
No, I don't object. Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth.
Another from the great poet.
The same.
Very well, Captain, I'll allow it. All I can say is, the coroner's office may be very sorry they ever asked me to officiate at this inquest. But proceed, Captain.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, let's assume, Mr. Thoreau, on your first ramble up the Adirondack with a cape, with your unidentified friend, passing by the location of the widow wreck, that you did spy the caboose in the surf, and that you did come upon a substantial amount of coinage.
If you say so.
I don't say so. This is only conjecture. Let's say you gathered it and counted it and divvied it up between the two of you. And then, let's say you found a secure place to bury it. After which you and your traveling companion continued on, eventually arriving at the home of the Wellfleet Oysterman.
Again, if you say so.
Mr. Thoreau, have you ever heard of the expression gold fever?
Yes, I believe I have, in connection with the California gold rush that took place in 1855.
But I am sure you never saw the Humphrey Bogart movie that was made during the 20th century. A movie called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. That was about a trio of prospectors who stumble upon gold and then turn upon each other in their greed, each of them fearing the other will try to murder them to steal their share. Sound familiar?
No, it does not sound familiar.
I'm curious about the Wellfleet Oysterman's family. Why the women reacted so suspiciously, even fearfully, when you paid them your visit. Was there something odd or alarming about your behavior, you and your friend? You weren't drunk, were you?
I never drink.
You weren't giddy? Maybe acting a little overly excited? Laughing too loudly? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more? Like you might have a secret between the two of you?
No, we were not.
Yet there must have been something about your behavior for the women to lock you in your room that night, for them to suspect and then report to the authorities that you and your unidentified friend might have been the two bank robbers the police were seeking.
Well, that is just a wild accusation that you are making up out of whole cloth.
But is it not probable?
No, it is not probable at all.
How about possible? Would you agree it's possible?
It didn't happen.
But could it have happened?
No.
I'm not saying it did. I'm saying, given the hypothetical I laid out for you, it's at least plausible, is it not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's continue with that hypothetical. Let's assume that after you and your companion left the Wellfleet Oystermans, you returned to where you had stashed your hoard, then spent the night on the beach around a bonfire, where one or both of you contracted gold fever.
No. I think that anyone who knows me knows that I disdain money and am one of the least likely persons to come down with such a ridiculous malady.
Well, what about your friend? Perhaps he didn't disdain money. Perhaps he wanted all of it. Maybe he came down with that gold fever and tried to kill you for your share, at which point you had to defend yourself.
No, that's absurd.
And then, after you killed him in self-defense, you buried his body and left the Cape. Answer, yes or no? Yes or no, Mr. Thoreau?
No!
Yet we know for a fact you returned the next year, the next summer, June of 1850. Again, yes or no?
Yes.
This time you came alone.
Yes, I came alone.
I wonder, in your book, you made note of the fact about the amount of erosion you saw taking place. and how the dunes were continually shifting and changing. You wrote about that, didn't you?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. Well, on page 177, let's see, it says here, you wrote, "The sand is steadily traveling westward at a rapid rate. More than 100 yards, says one writer, within the memory of inhabitants now living." Isn't that what you wrote?
Possibly.
Possibly, not possibly. It's right here in black and white in your own words. And if you had killed your friend in self-defense, might you not have worried about shifting sand, exposing the body, and returned the next year to move it? The criminal returning to the scene of his crime. Isn't that possible, Mr. Thoreau?
I don't recall.
I'm just asking, Henry. Just asking if it was possible. After all, you have carpentry skills, do you not? You built that cabin, didn't you?
Yes.
Coming back the next year to the Cape, you might have found more pieces of that toe cloth. You might have, mightn't you?
I might have, but I didn't.
And do you agree that the fact that the corpse was found with pockets full of widow coins inside the shroud, that this suggests that someone like yourself, someone who disdained money, might have done that as a gesture to your dead friend? Yes or no, Mr. Thoreau?
Yes, if you insist.
I insist on this, Mr. Thoreau. You built a crude crate. You weighed it down with beach stones and then floated it out using pontoons of driftwood until you were able to cut it loose to sink, where even if the body were to be recovered, it would naturally be assumed to be one of the unidentified crew of the Widow.
Okay, I've had enough of this. You brought me here to trick me? Was this some kind of a trap you intended to spring on me?
Mr. Cuffy.
All right, no, I've had enough of this. I'm done.
Mr. Thoreau.
No, you
Henry.
get yourself some other
Can I call you Henry?
Mr. Cuffy!
Sir. It's just...
Now you've done it, Waverly.
Oh, dear.
Seems your witness has stormed up, Captain Underhill. Seems your witness has stormed out, Captain Underhill.
Seems that way, Your Honor. My apologies. Gosh, this never happened to Perry Mason. You know, maybe Thoreau knew what he was talking about when he said the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation.
And so, Captain, what do we do now? Are we dead in the water?
If he had stayed, I had another theory I was about to present. Perhaps a more plausible one. Shall I deliver it, Your Honor?
I'll hear it.
This other possibility may hold more water, and I base it on the experience the good doctor and I had while we were camping out on the same beach, camping around a bonfire.
Yes, Waverly. You never explained to me what happened that night.
As I told you, I was conducting an experiment.
What experiment?
I'm going to need my witness again. Alex, why don't you step into the role? You could be Henry David Thoreau, can't you?
Me? Now, how can I do that? I don't know anything about the man.
Oh, you don't have to. Just read the passages I point out to you and act vaguely pompous. It's not that hard. He could do it. Here, take the book. There you go. Got your glasses. They're on your face. Good.
Well, I know how to read. I can do that.
Now, Mr. Thoreau, on page 84, you wrote that this person you identified as the wrecker gave you some tips. What were they?
I have no idea.
Well, do you recall that you showed him the sea clam you pulled out of the surf, and he told you it was good to eat? Afterwards, you built a bonfire to cook it. Would you read us that passage right there?
All right. Let's see here. There, having reduced some damp driftwood to shavings with my knife, I kindled a fire with a match and some paper and cooked my clam on the embers for my dinner. When the clam was done, one valve held the meat and the other the liquor. Though it was very tough, I found it sweet and savory and ate the whole with a relish. Indeed, with the addition of a cracker or two, it would have been a bountiful dinner.
Good. Until a few hours later, when you were visiting at the Wellfleet Oysterman's, you spoke with him about the clams. And what did he say? Read us what's underlined there on page 99, right there.
The old man said that the great clams were good to eat, but that they always took out a certain part, which was poisonous, before they cooked them. People said it would kill a cat. I did not tell him that I had eaten a large one entire that afternoon, but began to think that I was tougher than a cat.
9 pages later, on page 108, what did you write?
All right, here. In the course of the evening, I began to feel the potency of the clam which I had eaten, and I was obliged to confess to our host that I was no tougher than the cat he told of. At any rate, it proved an emetic in my case, and I was made quite sick by it for a short time while he laughed at my expense. What is the purpose of this, Waverly? Are you trying to suggest that Thoreau poisoned his friend with a cooked clam?
No. Killing someone with a poisonous clam would not have caused the injury to the corpse we observed. I am thinking of something different. I am thinking of another beach trick Thoreau learned from the wrecker on the beach. For that, turn to page 83 and please read what I've underlined.
We also read that they used to kill small birds which roosted on the beach at night by making a fire with hog's lard in a frying pan. The Indians probably used pine torches. The birds flocked to the light and were knocked down with a stick.
And you tell us about it again in what the Wellfleet Oysterman says. Mr. Thoreau, Alex, please read again what I've underlined.
He remembered well when small birds were killed by means of a frying pan and fire at night. So, Waverly, that's what you were up to.
So, Mr. Thoreau, does that bring back any memories for you?
Well, how would I know?
I don't know. Let me check. It's on the next page, I swear.
Well,
Good
clear it off here.
He's going to make us stay after to do this again, too. I'll ask you then, Alex. You and I came close to proving that ourselves when you ignored my order not to come back around the bonfire when I was apt to be swinging a frying pan in an attempt to swat birds out of the air.
You're saying he accidentally struck his friend with a frying pan?
It's a possibility, isn't it? And as a doctor, as the medical examiner, wouldn't you agree that a frying pan to the forehead was just the kind of blunt instrument that could have caused the exact kind of wound that you saw in the deceased? It would also account for the shattered fingers. Thoreau may have been trying to knock a flying bird out of the air to roast in his frying pan, just the way the old beachcomber told him he could, and accidentally clobbered his unidentified friend in the head. The accident would have been done without anger or malice at all. Trouble is, either way, Thoreau would have had a dead body to dispose of. Your Honor, I rest my case.
Okay, one more short scene. Judge Bellows, you're there. Abby, you're there. And Schofield. And, yeah, and you're there too. So, okay, good. Everybody come out a little bit more this way. Good. And we show. Yeah. All right. Okay, just pick it up there, Hattie.
Or Judge Bellows.
Oh, Judge Bellows.
Next.
To determine whether the death be natural or unnatural.
Definitely unnatural.
To present these findings to the coroner's office, as well as any recommendations to the Massachusetts Department of Justice as may be appropriate.
Here's where it gets complicated. There's no doubt that we owe a debt of gratitude and appreciation to Captain Underhill, for his keen and insightful research. By his close reading of Thoreau's Cape Cod, he's raised a strong suspicion, or at least the plausibility, as he puts it, that Thoreau was the most likely candidate to have committed the killing, and that his friend, whomever he was most likely the victim. Taken together, his findings can only present us with theoretical answers, but quite a bit of it has the ring of truth to it. Whether it would have been enough to convince a grand jury is debatable. What about you, Dr. Schofield? As medical examiner, were you convinced?
I admit, Your Honor, I was just as swayed as you were, even though I should have known better. I've seen my friend Captain Underhill put this sort of rabbit out of his hat many times before. In fact, I'm sure if you handed him a copy of Little Women and gave him a week to think about it, he could come back with enough evidence to convince you that Louisa May Alcott was the murderess.
What about you, Captain Underhill? Do you feel you've proven your case?
No, far from it, Your Honor. I managed to raise a few possibilities, that's all.
Bertie, what's your opinion?
My opinion is, if Thoreau were alive today, he might very well have brought a charge of slander or libel against Captain Underhill.
Well, it's not Henry David Thoreau I'm worried about offending. It's Jules Atherton Cuffy. That really was a bit of a trap you sprung on him.
It was rather a dirty trick, but I didn't think I could make my case as effectively without it.
All right. Therefore, I'm going to state that, owing to the antiquity of the crime, whether a 300-year-old murder or a 200-year-old murder, the evidence is lacking to draw any final conclusions or point any fingers at anyone. However, with a final tip of the hat to the captain here, allow me to do what he did and quote another passage from Thoreau's book. On page 190, he's speaking about the drowned and missing bodies lost at sea. But who knows? Maybe, in a way, he's writing an unintentional foreshadowing of this case when he wrote the following. There are more consequences to a shipwreck than the underwriters notice. The Gulf Stream may return some to their native shores or drop them in some out-of-the-way cave of ocean, where time and the elements will write new riddles with their bones. This coroner's court is hereby adjourned.
Didn't have to storm out like that.
You have been listening to Cape Cod Radio Mystery Theater's presentation.
Ready again?
Sure. You have been listening to Cape Cod Radio Mystery Theater's presentation of Riddle of the Bones, or The Missing File of Captain Underhill. The actors in tonight's play.
Actors in tonight's play, the part of Judge Bellows was played by Eileen Creston. Marine archaeologist Nikki Woodward was played by Carrie Burse. Dirk Scooby, salvage scuba diver, was played by Peter Eastman. The part of Hattie Dagmar was played by Naomi Ehrenberg. The part of Bertram Flagstaff was played by Greg Masterson. The role of Captain Waverly Underhill was played by Pete Milan. The part of Dr. Alexander Schofield was played by Jay Stewart. And the part of Jules Atherton Cuffy, playing Henry David Thoreau, was played by Egan Millard.
Tonight's play was produced, written, and directed by Stephen Thomas Oney. Theme music and original underscoring by Mark Birmingham. Stage sound effects and pre-recorded sound effects by John McManus and Annie Oney. One final note about the play. While all of the passages cited from Thoreau's book, Cape Cod, are absolutely historically accurate, there is one big untruth to this tale, which is that we don't believe Barry Clifford's salvage team actually brought up an accreted mass containing a shroud-wrapped corpse inside a coffin-like container. Mr. Clifford assures us, however, that if and when they do, he will be sure to let us know. Tonight's sponsors include the Cape Cod 5 Foundation, Lamb and Lion Inn, Charlie's Music, Minuteman Press, and R.J. Nardone Construction Incorporated. Special thanks to Tales of Cape Cod for its support and collaboration. To our broadcast audience, one final quick mention about the building in which tonight's program took place. The old colonial courthouse in Barnstable Village is the site where, in 1774, the earliest stirrings of the American Revolution took place. At the corner of Rendezvous Lane and Old Kings Highway, a determined group of 1,500 patriots marched on the then British courthouse and prevented the court from opening for its fall term. It was not until 7 months later that the first shots rang out in the villages of Lexington and Concord. This is Naomi Arenberg, wishing you a pleasant evening and inviting you to tune in again when the fog rolls in on another chapter of Cape Cod Radio Mystery Theater.